Have you ever wondered what it felt like to look at the world before belief existed? Imagine a dawn 5 million years ago when the air carried no words for God, soul, or ritual. Early humans roamed the plains of Africa, guided only by instinct and survival. But somewhere, in the quiet of that endless savanna, a question was born, not spoken, but felt. Something deep inside our ancestors stirred as they watched the sun rise and fall, as they saw life emerge and fade. Could there be meaning? Beyond the hunt, beyond hunger, beyond death itself? This moment, so invisible to science, yet so powerful to imagination, may have marked the beginning of faith. It wasn't a temple, nor a carved idol. It was an emotion, a flicker of awe before the mystery of existence. The first spark of transcendence might have begun when a primitive mind paused to wonder why the body of a fallen companion no longer moved, why the wind whispered through trees as if carrying voices from another world. Fear, curiosity, and longing fused together into something entirely new. The search for something greater. Archaeologists will never find that exact moment. No fossil can capture a thought, no tool can record a prayer. Yet, evidence from ancient remains hints that even our distant ancestors, perhaps Australopithecus afarensis, began to experience feelings that went beyond mere instinct. They may have sensed patterns, day following night, death followed by new life, and that recognition of cycles could have been the seed of belief. The first ritual wasn't planned, it was born from the rhythm of nature itself, a silent gesture toward the unknown. And so, before religion had names or doctrines, it was already part of us, woven into our biology, our fear of the dark, our hope for meaning. The first act of faith wasn't in a god, but in the possibility that life held something more. That question, whispered by a mind still half animal, became the foundation of every myth that would follow. If you found this glimpse into humanity's first spiritual spark fascinating, don't forget to like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments. When do you think faith truly began? As millennia passed, that flicker of awareness began to shape the way our ancestors perceived the world. The moment of wonder turned into patterns of behavior, repeated gestures that carried meaning beyond survival. Perhaps it began with the act of returning to a place where a companion had fallen, a silent pause, a simple offering of flowers or stones. The earliest humans might not have known why they did it, only that something inside compelled them to. It was not logic, but emotion guiding their hands, weaving mystery into memory. Among early hominins, this emerging consciousness found expression through observation. They watched life sprout from the earth after rain, saw the sun disappear and return, and felt a connection between these cycles and their own existence. The fear of darkness and the relief of dawn were not just natural responses, they became symbols. In that transition between instinct and reflection, humanity began to interpret the world as a living presence, something that could be pleased, feared, or even spoken to in silence. When we think of the Australopithecus or early Homo habilis, it's easy to imagine them as creatures of instinct alone. Yet the archaeological record whispers of something more. The care shown in certain burials, the organization of space, the presence of ochre or shaped stones near remains. These could be the earliest signs of meaning assigned to death. They reveal a mind beginning to sense continuity, as if existence didn't simply end with breath. The body became a vessel, the earth a threshold. It's impossible to pinpoint when that awareness turned into ritual, but it's clear that emotion was its architect. The loss of a member of the group did not only disrupt survival, it fractured something deeper, the invisible network of belonging. To repair that, Rupture, the first rituals may have emerged, uniting grief and reverence in one gesture. Through these moments, humanity began to step outside of instinct, to ask questions not about how to live, but why life mattered at all. The understanding of death transformed everything. Once early humans began to sense that life did not simply vanish, they started to perceive the world through a new lens, one tinted by reverence and fear. Around the glow of newly mastered fire, faces flickered with light, and shadow and stories began to form, not yet in words but in gestures, expressions and shared silence. Fire was warmth and protection, but it was also mystery, a living force that devoured wood and breathed heat. Its power inspired awe. It danced, consumed and revived, just like the rhythms of life itself. Could this have been one of the first sacred symbols? The relationship between humans and fire is one of transformation. It separated day from night, safety from danger, and civilization from wilderness. But beyond its practical uses, fire awakened something spiritual. It was unpredictable, like the moods of nature itself. Watching it, early humans may have seen reflections of their own emotions, anger in its roar, calm in its dying glow. The act of feeding a flame might have felt like feeding a living being, a partnership with an unseen presence. Over time, this interaction may have taken on ritual meaning, repeated not for necessity, but out of respect. With every flicker of light came new awareness. Fire illuminated not only the dark around them, but also the darkness within, the fears, the hopes, the questions. Around it, communities gathered and shared experiences, binding them together in emotion and memory. Those nights by the fire were the first classrooms of belief, where imagination replaced language as the vessel of meaning. Through that light, the mind learned to dream. And perhaps that was the true beginning of the sacred, not in the worship of an external God, but in the recognition of something powerful yet fragile, both outside and within. Fire became the bridge between the material and the invisible, the spark that mirrored the human soul's own burning desire to understand its place in the vast, mysterious world. The first rituals of mourning were not planned ceremonies. They were instinctive responses to loss. When an early human lingered beside a lifeless companion, something deeper than grief emerged. They may have touched the cold skin, placed objects nearby, or covered the body with leaves or stones. That simple gesture carried meaning. It was as if by honoring the dead, they could preserve the invisible thread that connected the living to the departed. This act marked a turning point in consciousness, an acknowledgement that life had weight beyond the physical. Burials found at sites like Cima de los Huesos or Kafze hint at this transformation. Bodies were laid carefully, sometimes with pigments or tools, tokens that had no practical purpose. These early acts were the first reflections of belief, the idea that something continued beyond the last breath. The boundary between life and death blurred, and through that blur, spirituality took root. The living began to care for the dead, not only out of memory, but out of faith. It's easy to underestimate the emotional depth of these gestures. Imagine the silence after a loss, the heaviness in a world where words for forever didn't exist. What could they do with that pain except turn it into ritual? These moments of mourning may have been the first collective expressions of emotion, uniting groups in a shared experience of love and mystery. And in that shared grief, humanity found connection not just with each other, but with something unseen. Every stone placed, every body covered, was a conversation with the unknown. It was the birth of reverence, of story, of spirit. Mourning gave rise to meaning, and meaning to belief. What about you? How do you imagine the very first funeral looked like? Share your thoughts below, I'd love to hear your vision of that ancient sacred moment. From mourning came memory, and with memory, symbols. Long before the first written word, humans began to communicate what they felt through shapes, colors, and patterns. The caves of Europe, Africa, and Asia became silent temples of expression, their walls painted with scenes of animals, hunts, and handprints. These were not random decorations. Each stroke of pigment was a connection between the visible and the invisible, a way to give form to thoughts that could not yet be spoken. Imagine an early artist standing before a stone wall, torchlight flickering. The red ochre in their hands was not just a tool, it was a fragment of life itself, the color of blood, of vitality. To paint an animal was to capture its essence, to preserve its spirit. In doing so, they may have believed they were invoking the strength of the creature, ensuring success in future hunts or harmony with the forces that governed nature. These paintings, carved thousands of years apart yet sharing similar symbols, suggest a universal language of reverence. Art became the first altar of humanity. Through it, early humans externalized the mysteries within. Each spiral, each figure, each mark may have represented cycles of life, of the sun, of rebirth. The caves themselves, deep and dark, symbolized the womb of the earth. Entering them was an act of return, a pilgrimage to the origins of existence. Archaeologists often describe these artworks as reflections of culture, but perhaps they were something more profound, the manifestation of faith in material form. When pigments met stone, humanity declared that the invisible could be made visible. These gestures transformed the natural world into a sacred canvas, a space where imagination met eternity. Through art, the human spirit found permanence, and for the first time, belief left its trace on the world. From the walls of caves to the depths of dreams, humanity's search for meaning began to expand inward. At some point, early humans discovered that the mind could journey even further than their feet. In sleep, they saw the dead again, spoke with unseen beings, and witnessed landscapes no daylight could reveal. To them, dreams weren't illusions, they were portals. This blurring between the waking world and the spirit world gave rise to the earliest shamans, individuals who seemed able to cross that mysterious boundary at will. Archaeological traces, ancient masks, rhythmic instruments, and painted figures half human, half animal suggest that these early visionaries existed long before civilization. They may have been healers, interpreters of symbols, guides through life and death. When illness struck or storms threatened, the tribe turned to them, not because they commanded power, but because they listened to forces no one else could hear. Through trance, song, and rhythm, they entered states where the ordinary world dissolved and something greater took shape. Imagine a night under a full moon. The fire crackles and the air hums with low, hypnotic beats of a drum. The shaman's body moves in patterns both ancient and instinctive. With eyes closed, they breathe in the smoke and breathe out visions of ancestors, of spirits, of the balance that ties all things together. To those watching, this wasn't performance, it was contact. The boundary between human and divine vanished, if only for a moment. These altered states, whether through exhaustion, dance, or plant rituals, may have been the earliest forms of spiritual exploration. They bridged experience and imagination, transforming fear into understanding and chaos into order. The shaman became the first storyteller of the sacred, carrying the invisible into words and gestures the tribe could share. Through trance, humanity learned to see beyond sight, and in that vision, faith found new depth. As human consciousness expanded, so did its sense of connection with the world. The wind, the rain, the thunder, the ocean, all became living forces. Early humans began to see the earth not as a resource to be used, but as a mother, a presence that nourished and punished in equal measure. Every tree, every mountain, every storm held a spirit. These weren't metaphors. They were realities in the minds of our ancestors. Nature was divine, and humanity's earliest faith was written in its rhythms. The evidence of this reverence is everywhere, carved. Stones aligned with the solstices, offerings buried in soil, animal bones placed with deliberate care. To ancient minds, these acts were conversations, the pouring of water into the earth, the lighting of fire, the raising of hands to the sky. Each gesture carried the same message. We see you. We depend on you. These beliefs weren't built on fear alone. They were born from gratitude. The hunter who survived a storm thanked the wind. The mother who saw her child healed thanked the water. The forces of nature were unpredictable, but they were also generous. Through ritual and respect, early humans sought harmony with them. To live was to participate in a sacred exchange between seen and unseen worlds. Over generations, these ideas shaped mythologies. The sun became a father, the moon a mother, rivers the veins of the earth. Spirituality turned into ecology, a way of understanding existence as part of something vast and alive. It wasn't about worshipping idols. It was about belonging to the world itself. What about you? When you look at a storm, a sunset, or a quiet forest, do you still feel that ancient connection? Tell me in the comments. What part of nature feels sacred to you? As the relationship with nature deepened, early humans began to realize that their connection to the sacred was not just individual, it was shared. Around fires, during hunts, and in moments of fear or celebration, they discovered that belief could unite. When a group moved together to honor the sun, the rain, or the spirits of their ancestors, they became more than a tribe. They became a community bound by something invisible yet powerful. Faith at this stage was not about doctrines. It was rhythm, repetition, and emotion. Chants, dances, and collective rituals synchronized hearts and minds, creating harmony among people who depended on each other for survival. Neuroscientists today might call it emotional contagion, but for those ancient humans, it was magic. To feel the same pulse, to breathe in unison, was to become one with something larger. In these moments, religion was not separate from daily life. It was life. The hunt, the harvest, the rain, all were sacred events that demanded cooperation and reverence. Belief served an evolutionary purpose. It reinforced trust, empathy, and social order. Groups that shared rituals survived longer because their members stood together in times of danger and uncertainty. The echoes of these early gatherings can still be felt in modern traditions, whether through prayer, festivals, or songs. The human impulse to unite in meaning remains unchanged. The first temples were not built of stone, but of human connection, eyes meeting across firelight, hearts aligned in hope. Through shared faith, humanity learned to see itself as part of a collective destiny. Belief became not only a dialogue with the universe, but also a pact among people. A promise that, even in the vastness of existence, no one faced it alone. As human groups grew, larger and more complex, their shared rituals began to take on new forms. Stories that once explained the hunt or the storm evolved into myths that explained existence itself. The gestures and dances that had once been spontaneous became reenactments of sacred tales repeated across generations. Through this process, the first threads of organized belief began to form, not through laws, but through memory. Each retelling of a myth was a bridge between past and present. The storytellers, descendants of shamans, became the keepers of wisdom. Around fires, they transformed the unknown into narrative, giving faces to invisible forces. The sun was no longer just warmth. It was a god with intention. The night was not merely darkness, but a realm ruled by other spirits. Every story served to answer a question the world itself could not explain. Why are we here? What lies beyond what we can see? These early myths shaped behavior and identity. They taught courage through tales of heroes, respect through stories of gods, and morality through examples of balance and consequence. In a time without writing, myth was both memory and law. To forget a story was to lose a piece of the tribe's soul. As myths spread through generations, they evolved with each telling, adapting to new landscapes, new fears, new hopes. A river might become sacred in one place, while a mountain became divine in another. Yet the essence remained. Humanity was seeking to connect its own small existence to something vast and eternal. And so, through myth, the human mind discovered immortality, not of the body, but of meaning. Belief gave time a purpose, linking those who lived, those who had died, and those yet to come in one continuous story. And now, after millions of years of evolution, we stand as the descendants of those who first wondered. The spark that once flickered in the eyes of Australopithecus still burns within us, refined, reshaped, but never extinguished. Every prayer whispered, every ritual performed, every question asked about life's purpose echoes that same ancient curiosity. The first rituals were not the inventions of organized religion. They were the heartbeats of consciousness awakening to its own mystery. When modern humans emerged, they inherited this invisible thread of faith. Burial practices became more elaborate, symbols more defined, and stories more layered. Temples rose where caves once stood, but the essence remained unchanged. The desire to connect to something beyond the self has always been our most human trait. Whether it's in the chants of distant ancestors or the silent hopes of someone staring at the night sky today, that longing binds us across time. Our ancestors didn't just invent faith, they discovered it within themselves. It was a survival tool, a comfort, and a guide. But more than that, it was an act of creation. To believe was to shape reality, to see meaning where none was obvious, to make life sacred simply by perceiving it as such. That ability to imagine the unseen is what allowed us to build civilizations, write poetry, and dream of eternity. So perhaps the story of the first rituals is not a mystery to solve, but a mirror to look into. The divine they sought is the same wonder that still lives in us. The awe of being alive, the need to belong, the courage to believe in something greater than fear. If you've journeyed this far with me through humanity's first steps into spirituality, take a moment to reflect. We are all heirs of that first act of faith. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and comment below with the phrase, "The first fire still burns in us." And if you want to keep exploring humanity's oldest mysteries, check out the next video. It might just change the way you see our shared past.